China has come out of this recession stronger than ever. It's going to grow at 8.5% this year. Its reserves are now at $2.3 trillion. They're higher than they've ever been, so far from being depleted as a result of it. And they are using this crisis as an opportunity to build an amazing new set of infrastructures for their next tier of cities. So they come out of this, at least in the first blush, much stronger than the rest of the world. Are they beginning to flex their muscles?
I think the key first thing is that, by the way, when this crisis happened, I don't know if you remember this, many people thought that this crisis would somehow derail the Asian story, that the Asian countries which depended on exports to US and Europe would somehow die as a result of the crisis. What nobody expected is that this crisis has accelerated the shift of power to Asia. And the Chinese are ready to be responsible stakeholders in a new global order. They do want to work with the United States of America. And so at this plastic moment of world history, if the US gets it right with China, then we are in for 2 or 3 decades of a comfortable time. But the US gets it wrong with China at this point in time, then it's very dangerous.
There has been in China for the last 20 years, roughly speaking, a kind of consistently pro-American foreign policy, by which I mean this, that the Chinese saw their salvation, their path to great power, the rise to great power is being fueled by a good relationship with America, because that gave them access to trade, technology, and also created a kind of umbrella, of security umbrella, under which they could grow. Is the current leadership and the next generation of leadership in China, from what you can see, still kind of thinking along these same lines, or has the rise of China, the financial crisis, the discrediting perhaps of some notions of the American model, has all this made the Chinese feel, you know what, we need to rethink our relationship with the US. We don't need, friendly relations with the US is not the paramount issue here.
I think the key point I want to emphasize is that Chinese foreign policy has always been pro-China. And they've had a fairly, consistent long-term strategy of managing the rise of China. And working closely with the United States has worked in enabling the rise of China, and so they'll keep on doing it. But you're right in suggesting, by the way, that this crisis has changed Asian and Chinese attitudes towards America and the West. Because until now, the general feeling was that when it came to economic management, when it came to financial management, the West knew best what to do. This is how you manage the world's financial situation. This crash, you have no idea the impact it's had psychologically. It's like scales falling from the eyes and people saying, how come? These guys were telling us how to run the world in the financial sector. And look how they screwed up. And believe me, this is something that's so hard to put across to a Western audience, how attitudes have changed. And the counterpart to that, incidentally, is that there's rising confidence in Asia that we know now how to manage things better. We know how to get the right balance between the invisible hand of free markets and the visible hand of good governance. And you need both. And all those who are saying deregulate, privatize, open up, gee, they were wrong. So in that sense, I would say there has been a sea change of attitudes. But at the same time, I'm absolutely convinced that the Chinese know that the only way for China to emerge peacefully is for the 1945 rules-based order to stay in place. And they want to emerge just like Japan and Germany did after World War II. They want that rules-based order, which has been managed by the United States, to remain. They don't want to shake it or break it.
Does that include keeping the dollar in its current position as reserve currency of the world?
That's a very tough question. And believe me, the Chinese are agonizing very hard about this dollar question because they have so much to lose. They know that if something goes wrong with the US dollar, at some point in time, if you cannot raise loans to pay for your deficits and you start printing money to pay for your deficits and the dollar goes down, China's going to suffer, right? They got a huge amount invested in the US dollar. So they would like to see a managed transition towards a world where they're not so reliant on the US dollar. But at the same time, they do not want to undermine the United States in doing this. They want to work with the United States to create a more balanced kind of financial regime that is not so fragile and not so dependent on one currency.
Kishore, Mahbubani, always a pleasure to have you on.
Good to see you too.